last autumn, you know, and a suggestion that that 1 billion would be subsumed into a general infrastructure fund pot. You know, and I think some in government are arguing that actually we shouldn't ring fence this for CCS. But at the moment, all the signs are that's still there. But I think what really matters is linking that with this electricity market reform contracts, as Julian was saying, those timescales. And much more delay does then create opportunities for more dissent and possibly U-turns on it. So I wouldn't say that it's completely safe, because nothing ever is. But I've been quite surprised at how resilient it's been so far. But they really need to get on with it if they want to actually secure that money, I think.
And I'll make the point that the £1 billion isn't actually sort of on the table; it's really under the table in a securely long chest. It can stay in that securely long chest for many years. But again, we've got different parts of government looking at different timescales. The Treasury's job is to balance the books right now, whereas what we're talking about is a strategic investment in a development programme, which again the UK has been pretty bad at doing over the past decades. But the lessons from history are that that's what the timescales we need to look at. And the third point is that we are legally tied into a low carbon reduction programme, both from Europe and from our own domestic legislation. So we either have to pay financial penalties or the embarrassment penalties of backing out of that. And all the cost projections done not by us but by international energy agencies or lots of other organisations show that having carbon capture and storage as part of the mix is the cheapest cost medium-term alternative. So it's sensible to have a mix of technologies, including carbon capture and storage. If you just go for nuclear build at the moment, then you know that the nuclear plants will be over budget, over time by a factor of 2. And there's my projection of the radioactive waste storage cost is that we know it's 70 billion for the decommissioning, and there's probably another extra 30 billion just for the storage disposal of that existing nuclear waste. So there's huge costs in nuclear which usually tend to get hidden.
I'd only just echo what Jim said, which is I think the concern is around the part of the support that is tied up with the electricity market reform, because that's what's going to add cost to consumer bills, and that's clearly a big issue. But that's an issue that would affect support for nuclear, affect support for renewables, anything other than combined cycle gas turbines, frankly. Yeah.
Because the way we're behaving at the moment is rather like we're getting our rubbish and we're putting it into next door's wheelie bin rather than our own wheelie bin, so they pay the landfill tax on it. And it's about us being honest about our own waste. And whatever we do about cleaner, greener electricity will cost more in terms of the final end user consumer. But when you work out, I'm not going to give a number, but we've done calculations about how much that might be, and it's not actually a huge bank-breaking extra price of electricity. It affects people in fuel poverty, that's very clear, but it's not something which will change the vast majority of domestic budgets in the UK.
Now, what obviously gets forgotten is the counterfactual. If we don't do low carbon, we're laying so into all sorts of risks about higher gas prices, higher fossil fuel prices. I wouldn't be this. Some of you say that's inevitable, but often in these debates about the effect of the green agenda on bills, there's only half the story told, which is what happens to bills if we go for the green agenda, not what happens to bills if we don't. And there's a pretense that there's a zero cost option out there, which is not to do the green agenda. And I think that's a very risky position to take.
Just got a few minutes left, so quick questions from Carolyn and then Julian.
Just wanted to get your viewpoint on the new CCS competition that's been launched and whether the government has now got it right, is it going to work, and also whether you think the £1 billion is at least split up among several projects, or do you think it will just go to one that the government will kind of see as its pilot project?
Okay. I mean, in principle, yes, they've got it right, because as I've said a couple of times, they got it wrong originally, which is to say specify the technology. This time they've kept it open. I think they've got it right. The roadmap that they published alongside says all the right things. I think, as we've said several times, the key thing on the £1 billion is that it isn't enough for one plant. Organic proved that. So even if you want one plant, you've got to ally that with the other support from the electricity market reform. And I think as Stuart said very clearly, aligning those timescales is absolutely critical. And at the moment, the document that came out just before Easter, that roadmap doesn't. I was surprised at how little detail it had. Extra. I've been waiting. each government document that comes out on electricity market reform in particular, there's an extra sentence or two added, but really the amount of detail that is needed about the timescales of these things, how these things are going to articulate with each other, putting in the bid for the part of the 1 billion and signing a contract which allows you to finance the plant. It's very, very thin, I think. So, that's why we're really emphasising the challenges of implementation, and that's one of the key ones, is making all that work together.
And so you think there'll be several projects that get bits of money involved?
If they can make that work together, that financial package, I'd anticipate that, it'd be more than one. I suppose I'd like there to be more than one for all the reasons we've outlined, because we don't know which technology is best. In the end, I couldn't really say, but I think the one thing I would say is if they can't get that coordination to work, the risk is you end up with no projects.
And I'll say I know of at least 4 technically very good projects which will be coming forward into that competition, and there's probably at least 6 because several people are not making theirs public. And the use of the billion, as Jim said, is rather like now, rather than getting 100% loan on your house mortgage for last year's version of the project, people are now going to get a 25% grant from the government, and they're going to have to take out 75% borrowing on the basis of the electricity market reform. So if that electricity market reform is not secure enough, the bank will not lend the money on that 75% borrowing. So you can have any number of projects, industry will make its own decision, all the components, as Jim says, the components are absolutely right, I think, to enable this to happen. It's just a question now of government giving the price formula at the correct level to enable it to happen properly.
Okay, thanks. Last briefly, Julian.
Thank you. And could I just ask you, Stuart, to elaborate a little bit? I don't know the timescale myself, but you seem to be suggesting that the timescale of the CCS competition was not in harmony with the timescale of the electricity market reform.
That's correct.
And the greater certainty that would... Can you just clarify a bit on that?
So the timescale for the CCS competition now is bidders are off and running. They have to submit bids within the next 3 months, I think. The government will make its first decisions about successful applicants towards the end of this year, and they will go forward to feed studies whereby they'll have to invest maybe 20 or 30 million of their own money, combined with maybe 20 or 30 million of government money in doing the engineering design, for a decision on investment sometime in the middle of 2013. By contrast, the timescale for the electricity market reform is that the bill for discussion in Parliament will be introduced during the session of May this year, so in the next month or 2. That can be easily anticipated to take a year to get going through Parliament, so it won't be until the middle of next year at the earliest when that becomes law. So again, you're asking companies to do a lot of prospective work and make decisions before the law can come in.
So even this initial work towards the end of this year, with the tens of millions involved,
will be companies gambling, you're asking companies to gamble 20, 30 million on the prospect of an uncertain price for the green electricity coming from these power plants.
That sounds like quite a big barrier to this working. I mean, you seem very positive about this new competition.
Well, I'm positive in contrast with the old one. The old one was so poorly designed that this new one is right. But I think that's why we keep emphasising that the implementation is the problem. And this is
that sounds like on the problem. It sounds like on the current part of it, because it's not working.
Well, that's not true, because you can still go onto this pathway number 1. You can still have that, but on these pathways, the enacting and going through these pathways requires governments to make decisions with a long-term vision of what they want. If the government wants CCS to develop, it has to start with the first step on the journey, which is these demonstration projects. And the first step on the journey is enabled by giving these initial bidders a sensibly high price, i.e. pretty much what they're going to calculate, giving them a high enough price for the electricity to make the project commercial. If they don't want commercial projects, then it won't happen.
We should finish up. I know some of you want to get on the tour, so I'll get Colin in a minute. And are any of you going to